Hi, Kate Duffy here from Tipping Point Recovery, where we do everything different when it comes to helping someone struggling with drug or alcohol addiction. Today, I'm going to talk about no does not mean no. So yeah, this was a thing for me when I was little, for sure. I was the kind of kid that would ask my mom something, she would say no, and I just didn't take that as an answer. I would ask again, I'd ask a different day, I'd ask in a different way. As a very little kid, I just didn't like no. Today, it actually really works for me. And it's one of my top teaching principles that I teach families who have somebody struggling with drug or alcohol addiction. And let me explain why. The way drug and alcohol addiction presents is lying, denying, justifying, minimizing, rationalizing, compartmentalizing, right? Those are all sort of inside manipulations of the current situation, not taking responsibility, putting the blame on you, lying, denying it, making it less of a problem, minimizing it. And so what I want to teach families, number one, is to learn how to interpret what your loved one is actually speaking through. Are they speaking through their addiction, or are they speaking through the part of them that might be really small, that is their soul, that is their essence? Mostly, as the disease progresses, we're listening to the addiction. And if you thought of this addiction as this monster, which we know it is, trying to take you over and your loved one, you would respond differently. So I want you to think about, when you look at your loved one, if you're hearing lying, denying, justifying, I want you to, even if you have to close your eyes or turn away for a minute and say, this is clearly the addiction speaking, take a deep breath. I want you to learn to respond differently. Because what we know to be true is, if they're lying and denying and you're calling them out on the lying and denying with the expectation that they're going to say, geez, you know what? You're right. What am I thinking? I'm being a real jerk. That's not going to happen. Drugs and alcohol have completely taken over, and I want to teach you how to stay in your truth, which is, that's not okay with you. Under no circumstances is it okay with you that someone you love is being taken over by this force that is far greater than all of us put together. And that's what we're doing at Tipping Point Recovery. When families get educated, I can say this very clearly now, when families get educated of what to do and what not to do, what is helpful and what's not helpful, it's a game changer. Your loved one will change as a result of you changing. Why are you here and they're not? Because they're addicted and you're looking for a way out. So we don't want to keep whining. I whined for years. Why am I the only one that's working on myself? Why am I the one? Well, because I could. And ultimately, when I stopped complaining about why am I the only one and just kept taking steps forward, I got better. And I started to surround myself with people that were better. So today's topic is no doesn't mean no. Let me explain where I first got this. Well, aside from being a kid and doing it, I worked in the emergency room for 2 years, on call with a police department. Anytime someone experienced a non-fatal overdose, I would go to the ER. And the thing that I saw happening in the beginning, which is really predominantly how our medical world treats drug and alcohol addiction, is because of the privacy laws. Of course, I couldn't just walk in the emergency room, fling the curtain, and go see the patient. The patient needs to approve that someone would come in, right? That makes sense. I understand that. But the way they were asking the patient if they would engage with me wasn't useful when it comes to addiction. And me, as a person in recovery, I had to educate the nursing staff, the docs, the whole anyone in the ER that was working with patients. And the question they were asking them was, do you want help? And 99% of them were saying no. Now, here I was out in the hall, knowing that on the other side of that curtain was someone that is a lot like me. I think of them as my brothers and sisters, but I couldn't get to them. So after a month of tears and frustration, I finally said to the chief of nursing, ask a different question. Because no does not mean no. In this situation, I don't want help is not true. I've interviewed thousands of those people struggling at the point of struggle and sober and in recovery on a path. None of us didn't want help. We're not going to tell you that because we're being controlled by our addiction. We're not going to tell you that because in the moment, the only thing on our mind is using drugs or alcohol to get out of the feeling that we have right then. That's why we use, because we want to get out of the feeling we have right now. So if you talk to us like we are like you, and we're able to access the rational part of our brain, yeah, we would say, this sucks. I don't like this. And you might find these windows of opportunity where your loved one is willing to have that conversation. But for the most part, we all want to get well. We just don't know how. You telling us how isn't going to help. We just need baby steps. We need to take baby steps. None of us can commit at the day we decide to get help on what we really need for help, which is long, forever. No one would commit to that. So we need to think of it a day at a time. We need to not ask questions directly to the addiction. We need to ask questions that are going to help us connect. So here's the question they changed to in the emergency room was, would you like to speak to an addict in recovery? Every single person said yes. So that may not be the question for you, but what I want to encourage you to do is stop asking questions that the addiction is answering. Okay? And I want you to look at your loved one assuming they don't want to live the life they're living. Just 15 minutes at a time, 1 hour at a time, 1 day at a time. Try this on and try thinking about whether you close your eyes or you turn away to try to imagine it's not your loved one that's talking to you. It's the addiction. It's vicious. It's completely shutting down their brain. It's hardwired in. It has one mission, and that is to use. And if I can be as frank as I've been now, this is lifelong, right? This is a lifelong illness that progresses over time. So my suggestion to families that are really tired of beating their head against the wall is stop beating your head against the wall and start to do things differently. Get yourself on this path so you can help your loved one make some changes. Hopefully this was helpful. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What are you hearing that you want me to interpret for you? You hear a statement, I can interpret it for you and give you some ideas of what it might be saying and what a workaround would be. We need to create workarounds. We need to stop believing the addiction and create workarounds, new phrases, new statements to connect with our loved ones. Just going to end with using the example of Alzheimer's and dementia. The reason it's super frustrating, by the way, to have a family member. I follow a couple of people on TikTok whose family members have dementia. And yes, it's very frustrating. The difference with these two illnesses is we're all trained that dementia is going to show up in a certain way. And people will forget. People will forget in stages. People will forget who you are when you're talking to them. So you don't ever spiral in anger. You may spiral in frustration and you may need caretaking for yourself because it's hard to do. And there's a lot emotionally to wrestle with. Same with addiction. But the key difference that I want to point out here is it's being described to you as a disorder that affects the brain and what you can expect. And that's what I'm wanting you to do with addiction. I want to describe it to you as a disorder that's not about alcohol. Stick with me for a minute. It's not about alcohol. The alcohol's the problem, but that's not the root problem. So it's not about just taking away the alcohol. And I want to teach you first to learn how to communicate differently so you get a different result. And how I best help you is by you telling me what you're hearing and let me coach you. And I'm happy to do that here in the comments. So tell me what you're hearing and I'll give you a different way to look at it. 1 minute at a time, you can create an entirely different relationship with your loved one built on connection and not adversity. You can do this.